Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first recording of the Big Apple's Core Real Estate podcast. Today, we're joined by Neil Austin, Vice President of Real Estate at Omnicom. We went for the big guns right out of the gates because he's also the chair of CoreNet New York City. So happy to have him here. Also because Magic Johnson literally wanted $50,000 to do it. So you're our favorite second place here.
David, it's great to be here.
Yeah, appreciate you taking the time. We're going to get right into it. The format of this is that we just go through. We're going to ask a few questions with our guests about their background. Hopefully Neil can tell us a little bit about that, some trends he sees in the market, what's interesting, what's going on, and then we'll close with a little fun stuff about both CoreNet and Neil personally as well. Try to get him to reveal as many embarrassing things as they possibly can. But to begin, what was your experience earlier in your career that made you realize you wanted to do something in real estate?
That probably starts back from when I did some work experience as a teenager. I used to help out a chartered surveyor, as they're called in England. We used to drive around measuring buildings and inspecting them in the morning. We'd then spend lunchtime in the pub, and then we'd drive around in his fast car looking at more buildings in the afternoon. So the sort of the lifestyle appealed to me then from real estate. I wasn't in the office at all, and I used to help that for a few years. So that was good. And when it came time to go to university, I thought, what should I do? And I thought I'd use that experience of working in buildings when I was earlier, and I chose to do a real estate degree at university. And that sort of led on from there. When I finished that 3 years of university, I got a job at Jones Lang Wootton, JLL as it's now called. It probably shows how old I am with the old name change there. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
That's great. And then when you were growing your career, did you naturally want to go towards sort of that global portfolio management, or how did you get to that point?
Well, it started up very much. Obviously, I was working in London, in the UK, and I trained to be this chartered surveyor, and I learned all the basics about real estate. And then I just went with the flow, really. I got offered opportunities. My first sort of role managing European real estate was with Bank of America. I was actually seconded by JLL at the time, and I was sitting in with them. I was the first secondee during portfolio management from JLL in Bank of America in Europe, and that started off my career looking at regional portfolios. And from then onwards, I never not done a regional or a global role, and that probably was when I was about 23 years old. So some time ago now, and it's always gone from there. But yeah, through doing that role, I was then asked to go to Hong Kong, and I lived in Hong Kong. Then I was asked to come back to London, and I was asked to go to Singapore, and I've never actually pursued that actively. I've just gone with the opportunities that have arisen, and then I've ended up in New York. That's great.
Really interesting perspective. But just because we're trying to keep this lighthearted, I was hoping you could share maybe either a serious note, some of the major cultural differences in business, or even if there's a few lighthearted anecdotes you have about working in so many diverse and different places throughout the world.
Okay. Well, as you say, I have worked in every continent of the world, done lots of different transactions and lots of different activity in real estate, and it seems all very different wherever you do it, but fundamentally it's all very, very similar. It's still got a landlord, it's still got a tenant, and the structure of the deal is always going to be depending on what leverage each side's got and what the objective of each side's got. But you asked about sort of stories, I suppose. I've had to close a couple of deals at certain times by doing things that I don't really like doing, like drinking. So one of the stories, I had to close this deal in Asia, and at the end of it, they said to close this deal, you've got to drink this drink, and I had no idea what it was. All I knew it was red, and it was big, and it's scary, and I thought, okay, it's a big deal, I better do it. And it was snake blood, so I had to close that. There's lots of stories about the benefits of snake blood, but the benefit to me was to get this deal done, and it was actually reasonably tasty. There's other stories where I was in closing a big transaction in China, and there was me, my local business head, and 13 people representing the landlord there. And I thought that to celebrate, they said let's have a drink to do this deal. I mean, it wasn't signed yet, and they brought out their finest Chinese wine, which was very, very expensive. And I thought, this is a nice way to close the deal. And then each of them in turn came round to me, and I had to down a shot of their fine red wine with each of them. So I did, after 13 shots later, that I did with the 13 of them, the deal was closed. So that was an interesting story there.
The sacrifices we make.
Indeed, yes.
Well, speaking of that, are there any particular challenges that arise globally when you're dealing with specific regulations or laws in different markets? Some challenges not related to just drinking.
Well, I mean, the first challenge is the language. Obviously that is it. But that's also the interesting bit. I mean, what I would say is most of the challenges that I find is what I really like it, because it is different. You're dealing with lots of different people, and they say different cultures. You've got the language, you've got the areas, the floor areas. You're dealing with pings, you're dealing with pongs, you're dealing with tsubos, square feet, square meters. There's all sorts of different area measurements, and everyone measures differently. So you need to understand that. You can't just apply your global standards that you've got back at head office and apply that around the world without adjusting for all the local differences there. And you mentioned laws. So there's a lot of laws and regulations in countries which aren't in the lease, so you need to know about that. In certain markets, you can break a lease on, so many months' notice, but it won't be in the lease. So, but you need to know that you've got that right as a tenant in certain markets. So, it's important to ask lots of questions, and I do that, and I still do that, to make sure I've got all the information there. And you need to rely on good, local resources on the ground from your service providers and your lawyers. And working very closely with the local business. So yeah, lots of differences to take into account there. But that, to me, has been the fun bit. Yeah. Which is one of the struggles over the last few years when you can't travel so much as well. So you can do the job remotely, but I still find it a lot more productive and beneficial to me and the companies if you can actually travel, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. See what you're dealing with in person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, since we are here and we're a little biased as a New York City CoRe podcast, what about New York? Anything in particular or unique or appealing about it, or that sets it apart from anything else?
Well, I mean, there's lots of things appealing about it. From a real estate point of view, it's just huge. It's big. I've been in all these markets, but it's probably the biggest market, which is challenging but also interesting. And obviously, the other unique thing about it is is the number. The fees that your brokers get paid here, if I ever came back in and did my job again, I'd probably be a broker in New York, because that is one of the things I found, and I was surprised about that, especially in dealing with all these brokers all around the world. Yeah, in New York, you make the big money here.
That's good to know. So it's bigger, and the brokers make all the money. Got it.
Exactly. Other than that, I mean, the fundamentals are very much the same, in terms of all the different markets. So, yeah.
Okay. It's a topic of conversation now throughout the world, and at the risk of possibly treading over some ground that's already been, would love to get your opinion on how the pandemic has affected demand for space recently and reoccupancy, just dealing with the different markets and different areas of the world that you work in.
Well, again, in certain places around the world now, to me, it's back to normal. People are in, every day of the week, and they don't, have a work from home, mentality or the opportunity to do that. That's a lot of people and companies I speak to in certain markets around the world. So you could say no real change, and probably no fundamental change going forward in terms of, the workplace strategy that a lot of people are talking about in terms of hybrid. In other markets, it's a big focus of everyone's minds in terms of how much space people need in the future, and what is that purpose of the office going to be in the future. Because we were on this journey, I think, before COVID and the pandemic started, in terms of how you use your space and what that space would be, and in terms of collaboration. But I think companies are really trying to work out now what they do need going forward. That's the big challenge. I mean, one of the big challenges of a corporate occupier anyways is headcounts. How many, what's the growth, what's the contraction, what's it going to be in 6 months, 12 months, 5 years time. Now you've got to factor into the whole equation of how many of those people are going to come in every day, every 2 days, every 3 days, lots of things to think about in terms of supply there and demand.
Sounds like an absolute headache, but
It's a
But
great,
interesting as
it's
well.
very, it's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
interesting, and there's no one size fits all. Everyone in different cities, different countries is looking at it differently, and within the same company, different people work in different ways. People like to work in different ways, so and I think you're going to find this is really going to link into the whole attraction and retention of talent, which to me is the real big issue out there. Not necessarily the real estate. It's how do you attract talent? How do you keep talent working for you?
pretty universal regardless of where you are, I'm sure. That.
Absolutely,
Yeah. Well, great. That's a really great insight, and thanks for sharing with that. We're going to shift a little bit now and go to specifically CoreNet and some of your experiences within here, especially for our inaugural podcast episode. Would love to know what inspired you to become a chairperson here at CoreNet.
Well, I've been involved with CoreNet now probably 20 years. First started going to events when I lived in Hong Kong, then London, then Singapore. Then when I went back to London again, I ended up being the chair of the UK chapter, which was great. And then after that led to me being on the global board of CoreNet. So and when that was when I moved to New York. And when I stepped down from the board after 3 years, I could then get involved with the New York chapter, and I was really pleased and excited to get involved, and was lucky enough to be asked to become on the board. And now I'm the chair, and it's a great honour to be involved with any CoreNet chapter, but especially to be involved with the largest CoreNet chapter in the world. It's absolutely fantastic, and I've had a very interesting time, very challenging time. Part of the benefits of being in CoreNet is to actually meet and greet lots of people and get to know them, and obviously during my time as chair, it's been during these COVID times, and we've discovered Zoom and virtual meetings and virtual parties and all that stuff, which is great, but you can't beat meeting people in person and partying in person.
Right, absolutely. So would you say that's the main benefit of CoreNet are those connections and people, or anything else specifically that you really feel like you've benefited from in your time, working with the organization and attending those events?
Me personally, there's two key things. There's the whole networking, and then there's the learning. You can do both together, which is great. For someone like myself who has travelled around the world and for business and lived around the world for business, joining CoreNet is like another family. Yeah. So wherever I've been, you've instantly got like-minded people in CoreNet that you can call on and help you grow and do your business in that market. So that's great. So, when I first got here, I started meeting people, and then everyone was friendly and welcoming, and I suddenly got connected. Which could have been very difficult if I hadn't have done that. So that was one of the key benefits, as well as learning. There's so many ways you can learn, as well as make friends within the CoreNet world. I find it useful in two ways. You learn new things and new ideas, but also it can reinforce stuff you think you already know as well. So when you're speaking to your peers and other people, you're in confidence that you're either at the leading edge and understanding what's going on, or you've learned something else and you can try it. So it can work both ways. So it's a very powerful organisation but the more you put in, the more you get out. So.
Absolutely. So again, selfishly, because first episode here, and we've got the chair here. We're kicking off this podcast. Is there any advice for us, or if just from your position, what you might like to see if you're listening to this podcast from a weekly basis, what would be interesting, or what you think would be a good goal for what we're trying to do here with getting this, different way of getting information to people?
Okay, well, hopefully all your future podcasts will be fun and informative. I'm not saying this one isn't, but hopefully they will be. And hopefully
we ordered a case of snake blood, so we're going to have the bond right away.
That's good. So I would I use podcasts a lot myself, and I find they're a great way to keep up to date with what's going on. And hopefully there'll be some great takeaways from these things on hot topics of the day. I like to think about what are those big issues that are keeping corporate real estate people awake at night. So hopefully we can come up with some great topics and ideas to explain that, what's going on. But the other thing is, back to basics, because I think everyone's always talking about what's the great new thing in real estate, but sometimes we forget about the basics. We still need to do portfolio management. We still need to do transactions. We still need to manage buildings. We still need to fit them out. We still need to design them. So there's all the basic stuff that people need to do, and there's always new people into the coming into the industry that need to know the basics as well. They can't just learn about the metaverse or Bitcoin or other things that will impact real estate, I'm sure, in one day. And hopefully one of these podcasts will explain that to me as well, because I don't know. I don't know whether you do.
You're right. No, that's interesting. I think there's always a push to get the latest and greatest things. So that's why we're fully announcing our new 101 education series on the podcast here. No, that's great. That's great perspective. We'll do some fun ones here to close out, if that works. If you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self, just getting started in your career, one thing, what would you tell yourself?
Well, I probably already said that. I probably would be a New York broker.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but actually, if I wasn't, what I wish I'd done, and it's on my New Year's objectives every year, is to speak Spanish and learn piano. But I've never done that, so I would. That's just me, nothing to do with real estate. But yeah, there's things I wish I'd have done. But yeah, become a broker and come to New York. Yeah.
Learning Spanish has been on my to-do list for about 25 years as well. That's great. How about one interesting or unique fact about yourself you'd be willing to share with?
When I was young, what did I played football, or soccer as you call it here, in front of 60,000 people at Wembley Stadium in a national tournament that we won. So yeah, that was one of my sporting claims to fame. That I'm happy to talk about soccer with anyone for as long as they can listen to me.
Well, 60,000 is slightly below our audience for this podcast right now. So, I'm glad that you have experience with large crowds. But we're looking at giant delivery. How about one thing that sparked your interest in industry news recently that you thought was, to go back to what's new and hot, I know?
It's probably that metaverse thing again, if I'm saying it right again. You read a lot about it now, and I think a lot of people are trying to understand what it means. And I'm not sure what it does mean yet. So that is sparking a lot of interest. A lot of people are trying to talk about it. I think a lot of people want to know about it. I'm not sure if anyone does really know what the impact is going to be to real estate and how that's going to impact corporate real estate people around the world. But yeah, that's the big topic I think that's out there.
And maybe to close, what you think is New York, or unique New York, unique about your New York experience being here?
Well, I even today when I came in, I still feel like a tourist. I love it. I feel like I'm on a movie set. So to me, it's it's big, exciting, and I just enjoy working here. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, as just a young professional, traveling that much must have been an incredible experience. I mean, was there culture shock? Was it easy, difficult? Can you just shed a little more light on being in such a global role early on?
I'd often done lots of traveling, when I was younger, through holidays and sport. I played a lot of sport when I was growing up, and I was fortunate enough to go on lots of tours around the world playing football and cricket and other sports like that. So traveling wasn't a surprise or a change for me, but going there and having to work was, and being responsible, and so that was the big challenge, to all these different places, and arranging my own itinerary to meet people and meet the different businesses and meet the service providers. That was challenging, but also enjoyable, because I was meeting completely different people that I'd never met before, with different views and walks of life. So yeah, that was fun.
I'm sure even just logistics, something as basic as that. I mean, I still struggle, and it's where the technology at this level is crazy. Even just a few years ago, I can imagine some of the challenges early on in your career, lining things up, and different languages, different challenges, different cultures.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier now, but back then, I ended up going to Pakistan when I was young. I had to remain my own, security guard, and that to look after me while I was traveling around, because it was, an interesting place to go. But the security was crucial to that. And some places I went when I was young, there was no English, and it was all in, it was a foreign language, and that was really challenging. You couldn't, check on your phone what everything meant or anything, because there was no mobile phones when I first started traveling. And I remember the first time I went to Moscow. That was very challenging as well. They had this system then. I'm sure they do now, but anyone would stop and pick you up and give you a lift, like a taxi service. But I was there with actually a colleague from one of the big real estate firms, and who lived there, and he said, we'll get in this car. We drove a few hundred meters down the road, and then he said, I think we'll get out now, because on the front passenger seat there was this huge big, machine gun that was on there, and he said sometimes we get in cars where there's guns to protect themselves. So that was a bit of an eye opener for me in terms of, oh gosh, I wasn't expecting that when I left this morning. Yeah. So yeah, you get different funny and scary moments on your travels, but that's again why I've enjoyed it and always liked doing it. Yeah.
So besides the UK and Moscow with machine guns, did you have any particular favorites, or just a place that you couldn't wait to get back to?
Gosh, so many great places, and it's hard to pick out one as a favorite place to go and do business, because I've been all the way down to Chile, and went to Chile and went to the wine regions around there. Went all the way down to New Zealand and went to the wine regions there as well. They were two of the furthest places I've been on trips, and they were fantastic. So yeah, they sort of stick out in the memory of two of the favorite places I've been on business. Yeah.
Just from a practical standpoint, if I was you, the second I was done with work at some of these places, I'd want to be able to take advantage of some of the tourist sites. Were you able to balance, let's use the phrase work-life balance, when you got to some of these locations, or was it just the level of work that you maybe felt like you missed a little bit in some of these places and didn't get to see it?
In hindsight, if I would, I should have stayed in and done a lot more, touristy stuff in a lot of the places I've been. Generally, you got there, you did your work, and you got out. Especially when I was doing a lot of European and Asian stuff out of Singapore and London, you try and do day trips. So I'd do, so you could get back and either see the family or get back to the day job in the office. So yeah, I was enjoyed the trips, but yeah, didn't spend too much time, unfortunately. Making the most of it. Yeah.
All right, I know one of the major allures for me in coming to the city from suburbia was food. How about a favorite lunch spot in the city?
Good question. One of the places I end up going the most, funny enough, is a small sandwich shop called Pret, which originates in the UK. And whenever I go in there, I feel a bit homesick, because the sandwiches they do there, remind me of London. And actually, they're quite small as well compared to the big sandwiches that you do here. I still can't get over those big deli sandwiches with this much meat in it. I can't really get used to eating that much, to be honest. So yeah, I end up spending most of my time in Pret when I go to lunch. In terms of restaurants, I haven't actually got a favourite. I don't eat out enough, probably. That might be a New Year's resolution for me. Yeah, eat out more in New York.
Absolutely, that's a great one. How about a happy hour spot?
Oh, the bar, definitely.
Okay. I mean, a specific bar, perhaps? Are you a wine, beer, spirits?
Normally that order, yes.
Okay, there we go. Just got to hit all the bases. Yeah. No, there's no one bar I would go to or happy hour. I probably don't know enough about the bars. That's the problem with the pandemic over the last 2 years. I've not been to enough happy hours. So we'll get into some hopeful business specifics as well. It seems like in New York, some of the longer-term leases are coming back, but a lot of our experience is just limited to New York. Can you talk about the structural differences between a place here and maybe globally that's quite different?
Okay. Well, growing up in the industry in London, traditionally leases there are about 25 years. So, I come from a place where leases are very, very long, and, over time we were trying to get as an occupier, get them shorter and shorter, because you were sort of locked in for that time. So a 15-year lease in New York is actually quite short compared to the old UK ones I'm used to. But again, that's still longer than most of the leases we deal with around the global portfolios in all the jobs I've done. You get different lease lengths in different markets, and in some markets you want longer leases and the landlords won't give it to you. In some markets, though, you have the benefit of the local landlord and tenant law, which allows you to keep renewing and renewing, which again, it gives the tenant the benefit of longer terms if you want to, but you can get out if you want to, which gives you great flexibility and a lot of power for the tenant. So yeah, most countries, different tenures, different options of breaks and stuff to consider, different renewal mechanisms. Yeah, so you need to understand each market you're going into, and really determine how long you're prepared to commit to and how much flexibility you need. And sometimes a long lease would be exactly what we would want, because we'd want to do a major fit out and depreciate our assets over some time. In other markets, we'd want a shorter lease for that flexibility, depending on the business in that particular market, and also depending on the volume of people you've got in a market. It's nice to have a combination of both sometimes, some longer leases, some shorter leases, even some, flex serviced office leases in there for some other projects and stuff. So, I think each market's different, and it does depend on what the business need is.
And do you think that desire for flexibility has been heightened because of the pandemic?
Absolutely. I think there's a definite need for more flexibility at the moment, and a lot of the flexibility at the moment, though, is probably just to wait and see. Kick the can down the road a bit, because nobody really knows how much space we're all going to need going forward. I'm sure. People are still trying to work out how much space. So let's get some flexibility. Who wants to commit for a long term if actually they're not sure how many of those people are going to come in to this market? We may still have the people, but companies may have those people somewhere else, or they may be working from home, or it could be a combination of the two. I think this really has made people think again, how they want to work, what the purpose of that office is, and how much space they need in the future, which is why flexibility is crucial. But there's a balance between the cost of flexibility as well, because often, the more flex you've got, the more it's going to cost you.
Interesting. So we know you can't talk anything specifics about your current, deals and leases, but just industry-wide, what's your predictions, thoughts for the next 15, or let's say 5, 10, 20 years? Will there be greater demand in spaces in some of these larger urban areas? Do you see a shift away from that, or is it just changing too fast to really have a good prediction for what's going on, and you look at it on a short-term basis?
That is a long time to think. Yeah, I thought you were saying 15 months, and I might give you a better answer. 15 years is a long time. There's so many things going to happen, isn't there, in terms of the workforce, and what is it going to be done, and how much is AI going to have an impact into what we do in the future? Automation could make a big difference. And people could work from anywhere. We could all be sitting at home working in the metaverse, couldn't we? Or something? I don't know. Lots of things to consider there, but all I know is that things will change, I think, and change is constant, isn't it? And I think that again keeps me interested in it. I like change. There's good change, bad changes, but if you can use change as an opportunity to improve, and that's a good thing.
At a minimum, it's always interesting, right? So.